Warning, this is the Property Podcast, but not as you normally know it. This week, we're being brutal, we are not holding back, and we're just going to tell you as it is.
Welcome to the Property Podcast, where every Thursday, property investors come to be informed and inspired. I'm Rob D with Rob B, and this week we are dropping some truth bombs. You will learn all the ways in which slick marketing can lead you astray. You'll learn all the things that can go wrong. You'll learn about the frustrations of being a property investor. But stick with us, it's not all negative. And at the end, we've got a completely free service that you can use to make sure that you get on the right track.
So at last we have a news story where we're not ripping apart the headline and getting angry about what's been produced. We actually got an interesting article from Property Investor today, which looks at the best UK university towns and cities for property investments. Now, the way they've ranked these universities and towns is unclear. They've used yield, for example, but they've also looked at capital growth potential. Now, the areas that aren't doing well may not come as a shock to you. It's Oxford and Cambridge are ranked near the bottom. And that's because in those areas, they've seen a lot of price growth over the last few years. The yields are very low, so it's unattractive. But Rob, the place that came out top is an area that we've not really talked about a lot in the past and possibly want to watch for the future.
Yeah, that's Newcastle, which if you were getting all your geography from the Property Podcast, you'd never have heard of before because we'd never mentioned it. And we've kind of ignored the Northeast in general. We spent a lot of time talking about the Northwest and the Midlands. And that's because of where we are now and what we see as being ahead in the cycle over the next few years. But there are other areas that are further behind at the moment that are primed to do very well. And later in the cycle, Newcastle could easily be one of those places because it's got loads going for it. The prices are lower and therefore yields are higher. That means it's got room to grow where other areas maybe don't. So it's not made it onto our list of areas to invest in 2019. Probably won't for 2020, but it is one to keep an eye on for the future.
Places that did make our list, though, are the rest of the cities in this list. So second was Nottingham. We've talked about that as a place to watch this year. Third, Leeds, again, on our list. Fourth, Sheffield. And fifth, Manchester, again, on our list. So we're in broad agreement with the best places to invest in the UK right now. And while we're not ready to endorse Newcastle as a place to invest just yet, we'll definitely be keeping a close eye on it for the future.
When you're starting out in property, it can be surprisingly difficult to find anything negative, anything about the problems, anything about the drawbacks, because anyone who's trying to sell you something hasn't got anything to gain from highlighting those areas of investment. Courses are all about the upside. They want to get you excited about property because they want you to spend money. They tell you about the great things that you could achieve, but not so much about everything that you'll have to go through to make that happen. This episode is our attempt to redress that balance a little bit and share some brutal truths about property that you don't often come across. This is going to sound like a negative episode, Rob. If somebody just listens to this for the first time, they might think, why the heck are these guys doing a podcast about property? They clearly hate it. But that's not the point. Pretty much every other episode we do is positive. But it's very dangerous to get into property with the idea that everything's going to be fantastic all the time. But worryingly, I think a lot of people do get involved with that mindset.
So yes, it will sound a bit ranty at times, but it's important because people are just hiding this. They're not talking about it, and it's important that someone does, so we will. So let's crack on through this list. Let's get through this therapy, Rob, because we've got a lot to get off our chests here. Because the first thing we've got to talk about is that things go wrong at all stages of your journey. This doesn't happen very often, but it's amazing that people will contact us and say, oh, this has gone wrong. And I must be pointing the blame at us because something's gone wrong for them in property. It feels like we talk about this a lot on the podcast and keep reminding you that things will go wrong and it's not rainbows and unicorns. But the reason why this is number one on the list is to get that message back across. Yes, there are great things that happen if you invest in property, particularly over the long term. But in the short term, day to day, things are going to go wrong. And they're going to go wrong at every stage. Your offer may not be accepted. You may be gazumped last minute. Your mortgage might not go through. You might not get the mortgage product you want. Your solicitor might be hopeless. Your tenant plays up. Your property has maintenance issues. You have a leak. There's a fire. You know, some of them are extremes, but stuff will go wrong at some point. If you are looking for an investment where nothing goes wrong at any point, then put your money in a safe and leave it there. Because most investments, things go wrong. While the upsides are huge and you can create something meaningful in terms of wealth creation. The cost of that is that you're going to have to accept that things go wrong.
And there will be periods when they all go wrong all at once. This just seems to be the way it goes. I know others have had this. I had it a couple of years ago. I talked about it at the time, where everything was going wrong with all of my properties at the same time. I had every maintenance issue you could think of. I had my first ever tenant who I was having to evict. I had a purchase that was going wrong. You'll always have periods of time when you get lulled into a false sense of security, and then you'll have a time when it all hits you at once. It's just the way it goes. And if you're not prepared for that, then do not invest in property. The next brutal truth. I can't believe we're even having to talk about this, but seeing as a lot of people seem to tell you the opposite, let's say this. You do need money to invest with. Yes, you cannot invest in property without having money to invest with. That might sound like the most obvious thing you've ever heard, but if you spent any time on the internet, you'll have come across a lot of people saying, oh, you don't need any money. There's all these strategies that you can use. There's ways to control property. There's ways to use other people's money. There's ways to not put any money down. And you know what? Technically, they're right. You can do any of these things, but most of them are spectacularly hard to do or are a spectacularly bad idea. If you've never invested before, do you really think it's a good idea to do your learning with someone else's money? I mean, depending on your morals, maybe you think it's better than using your own money. But personally, I think you should learn your lessons and be confident in your model before putting anyone else's money at risk. And as for investing without any of your money and without anyone else's money, there's nothing you can do that's really investing. You can manage property. You can make profit from property, but you'll be earning that money. You will not be investing. You will not be earning long-term capital growth. You will not be having a hands-off experience. That's not a drawback of property. You need money to invest in anything. It just shocks me that people believe that for some reason, property's different.
And again, these same sort of people are talking about how you can get rich quickly. I've seen nonsense like becoming financially free in a week. If it was that easy, why is that same person peddling courses in the Gatwick Holiday Inn on a Wednesday night? If they could just become financially free every week and just keep making the money, you can buy Branston's Island off him because you're so good at it. You're not. You're a con. But what you are doing is preying on people's needs and wants, because people want to invest in property if they have no money and they want to get rich quick. And because these people know that, they will tell them that it's possible, sell them courses without them realising how hard this is actually to do. So if you've got into property to get rich quick, well, I'm sorry, you're in the wrong game. Try the lottery, you've got more chance of it happening. The odds are not with you in getting rich in property. You can get rich over the long term, but it is not a get rich quick scheme. And if you've come into it for that reason, get out.
So let's assume that you are still here. You've got money to invest with, or you're saving up money to invest with. You're okay doing that. You realise it takes money, and you realise that you're not going to be rich by next week. The next truth about property that you need to understand is that it will take up your time. You cannot invest in property in a completely hands-off way. Other investments, like shares, for example, you can just click a few buttons and you own them and you'll never have to think about it ever again. With property, that's just not possible. If you do it the normal way, it'll take up a lot of your time. You'll have to do a lot of research. You'll have to go to a lot of viewings. You'll have to talk to a lot of professionals like solicitors and mortgage brokers. And then you'll have to manage your property, which if you do it yourself, could take up a lot of time. None of this is a bad thing. That's all completely normal and completely understandable. Property is a fantastic investment. It offers really amazing returns, but you have to put in some effort to get those returns. That shouldn't come as a surprise. You can invest in property in a more hands-off way. So, for example, we've got Property Hub Invest that will help you find the right properties, start you off with your research, and then help you out through the purchase process. But that doesn't mean there's going to be nothing for you to do. You'll always, even with help, have to put some time into the mortgage application process and into getting all the paperwork signed. And then even if you hand the property over to a letting agent, and even if they're a good letting agent and they do what they should be doing, there's still going to be some time that you have to put in answering their questions and giving them decisions when necessary. Like I say, this is not a bad thing. It's just a fact, but it's a fact that tends not to get highlighted that much. You hear a lot about the results, but not very much about the work.
Yeah, and a lot of that work is made up of paperwork and admin. I hate paperwork and admin, but you have to force yourself through with property. Ultimately, if it's your mortgage, you're going to have to sign it. You may have someone who help you through that process, and yes, tech is improving things, but it's a long way off from where it needs to be. You're going to have to put time in, and you're going to have to do the paperwork. And it's not just while you're buying the property, it's the ongoing paperwork and admin that you need to do, the paying of service charges and ground rent, the rent reviews that you should be doing each year, or at least your letting agent should be on your behalf, but having that conversation with them to see what the outcome of that review was. There's loads of things. It's going to take up time. The paperwork and admin is huge. And you can make it easier by outsourcing, and you can make it easier by working with companies like Invest or Let's, like Rob said already, but it doesn't mean it disappears altogether. There is stuff that you will need to do. So just be prepared for that if you get involved in property.
The paperwork drives me crazy as well. And the other thing that drives me crazy is that everything takes forever. Property is a weirdly old-fashioned business. If you come in after you're used to investing in another asset class, you're going to think that you've gone back in time by 50 years. Everything is paper-based, everything is manual, everything is slow. I was listening to an interview with someone who'd made a lot of money buying and selling websites, and he decided to take some of his money and put it into property. And then he ended up just giving up because he couldn't believe how long it was taking. Deals that he's used to getting done in a few days end up taking a few months. And it's just the way it is. Getting your mortgage offer through will take forever. Getting through the legal process, even if everything is absolutely fine and there are no major drawbacks, will take months. The whole thing is slow. Again, that's not a reason for not investing in property. It is frustrating. I'd like it to be faster, and one day, I'm sure eventually, it will catch up with the rest of the world. But you need to be prepared. If you're coming in expecting to steam ahead and have 3 properties by the end of the month, you will be disappointed. So you need to understand, to invest in property involves a fair old dose of patience.
I don't think this is exclusive to property, but if you haven't learnt this life lesson yet, it's a good one to let it hit home now. So nobody cares about your portfolio as much as you do. Or nobody cares about you as much as you do. I know, it sounds pretty grim. People do love you and people do want to help you, but nobody will care about your property portfolio as much as you do. You have to understand that. You will give more of yourself to your portfolio. You will check things more than other people will. You will research more than others do because it's yours. You will have to chase people because you care more. Because it's yours, it's more important to you. To the solicitor who's dealing with 100 caseloads, you are 1 in 100 in terms of the importance to them. And you have to accept that at every point of your property journey. Now, because of that, service standards can feel poor. And you know what? In a lot of cases, it is. But even where people are at the top of their game and doing their best work, they still won't care as much as you. So you have to accept this as a property investor. But if you do, it's actually quite liberating because then you won't let it get you down. You won't let it feel painful. You won't be annoyed that other people don't care. And it'll also make sure that you double check things that others might not.
Something else you need to understand that tends not to get highlighted is that property prices do fall. Yes, over the long term, they have always gone up, and we believe that they will continue to do so. But that doesn't happen in a nice, neat, steady line. There are some years when property prices fall. There are some periods of time where they fall for several years in a row. And there are points where they fall rapidly. This is something that you need to understand and accept. If you're not prepared for a property that you own to fall in value at some point, then you shouldn't own it in the first place. It doesn't mean that you are happy about it happening, doesn't mean you want it to happen. You need to understand that it can happen, it will at points happen, and you need to be okay with that. The good news is that prices tend not to fall randomly. You can avoid buying at times when prices are likely to fall soon. And if you're aware that falls are likely to happen soon, you can make sure that you're prepared and you're not going to be in a situation where you're forced to sell at a time when you don't want to. If you're newer to the podcast, go to our website, type cycle into the search bar, and you'll find plenty that we've done on the 18-year property cycle. They'll really help you to understand how property prices move and why, so you can realise that property prices do fall, but you can be okay with that.
The last brutal truth, and for me, probably the one I fall for all the time still, is that the thought of owning is better than the reality. I love a deal. I love getting excited about finding it, whether it's for me or someone else. I love the thought of getting this beautiful new property into my portfolio. And then, when you complete, nothing. You forget about it. If you've set your processes and systems up and you've outsourced a lot of the work, then you can forget you even own the property. The thought of owning it is far sexier than the reality, as we've discussed in length already. We raise it because you need to be ready for that. Because particularly if you're just starting out in property, The thought of getting your first one or two investments may really motivate you, and that short-term goal will drive you on to get through the paperwork, get through the mortgage application, because the excitement of owning this property is going to be worth all the effort and aggro. But here's the thing, that feeling is short-lived. And after a few weeks, life gets back in the way, and you start to forget that you've even done it. Now, that might be enough to get you through to your first one or two investments, but this is where people stop. And this is the bit that makes me feel sad that people give up at this point, because the high isn't big enough for them. They're not motivated now to get another investment because they've realised that, those endorphins aren't going to be as strong next time, because the reality is it's just owning a property. And this is why, because of this and all the things we've listed today, having a goal to be an investor isn't enough. You need to have more meaning behind being a property investor. Just saying I want to be financially free isn't enough. You need to know what that means to you. What is financial freedom? Because for you listening, it's going to be different to the other person listening. Hello, you on the tube. Your financial freedom means something to you. But hello to you in the car, it means something completely different to you. So just saying you want to be financially free through property is not enough. You need to have a goal that you can emotionally anchor to that will move you forward when things get tough. Because you know what? Having a portfolio that gives you a meaningful freedom, or that allows you to pass on to wealth to others, or allows you to help out family members who are struggling right now, or that allows you to retire early, that's worth it. That is why you do it. That's why you put up with this, because the end goal is beautiful. It is worth working for. And like all big, audacious goals, you're going to have to work for it. It's not going to come easy. Most people don't tell you that, though, and that's why we've done this podcast. But if you get anchored to an important goal and you keep refocusing on that, and you review your goals and you constantly take steps towards it, then you'll get beyond the first or second property. You won't give up. You'll keep motivated and you'll keep pushing on. So yes, property isn't easy. Yes, there are things that will go wrong. But if you get this right, and if you have laser focus on what you want to achieve, property investment is still a wonderful thing to do.
So if you've been investing in property for a while, hopefully you've been nodding along to at least some of this. You'll have gone through some of these experiences, and you'll know that, yes, you'd rather not have them, but you'll come out the other side and everything's fine. If you're brand new to property, if you're just starting now, or if you're still saving up, then, well, you're in a much better position than you were 20 minutes ago. Because if you thought that you could be rich by this time next week, there was some easy formula you could follow, then it only would have ended up in disappointment, and chances are a fair bit of lost money as well. But instead, you can now go in with eyes open, prepared for the challenges and with a plan to overcome them. As Rob said, having that goal, having that long-term focus is critical to having the motivation and the drive to get through the inevitable challenges and get to where you need to be. That's why we talk about goals on the podcast all the time. We've got a whole course about goal setting as part of Property Hub University. It's free, and you can find the link to that in the show notes. But recently we've taken it a step further as well, and you can now have a call with a member of our team completely free, where you can tell them about your goal. They can validate that it's clear enough, that it's realistic, and they can help you break it down into the steps you need to be taking towards it. Because having that big, audacious goal is fantastic, but it can then feel daunting when you snap back to the present day and go, great, but where do I actually start with making that happen? And that is what our team can help you with. Like I said, it's free. This is something that we're investing in because we know that it's important. This is something where we see so many people struggle, and this can be a great way to get you unblocked. So all you need to do is go to propertyhub.net/goals. That's propertyhub.net/goals. You'll see a calendar on there that's got our team's availability. You can book in your day and time. You can have that call, and you'll go away from that knowing that you're on the right track and knowing what you have to do next.
So we've talked about the trials and tribulations of property investment, but there are also so many successes, and luckily you share them with us all the time. It might be through Instagram, it might be through the Property Hub forum, or it might be via email or an iTunes review. However you do it, we don't mind, but we just love you sharing your journeys and letting us know how you get on. And this week we've got a message from Mr. Capricorn on Instagram, who says, "Thanks, Rob and Rob. You're both a great inspiration and have changed our mindset, which in turn has changed our lives. 3 years ago, I lost my job. We just had a baby and we were paying 2 mortgages, and I had a 90k refurb on the go. I was contracting at the time, which helped. However, since then, we have a further 3 properties and another one on the way later this year. We are changing our strategy for the next one, and we're also starting an online business, which has nothing to do with property. My goals are set over a 10-year period. 5 stars all the way. Well, thank you. 5 stars to you for getting through a period that was difficult, pushing on, and being focused on your goal. Like we touched on today, having that long-term vision, that goal gets you through the difficult times and keeps you focused and motivated. So, Mr. Capricorn, we salute you. Well done.
So we've laid down a lot of truths in this episode. Hopefully we haven't scared you off, but we put you in a stronger position because you now know what the challenges are and you can start forming a plan to overcome them. Let us know what you thought of this episode. We'd love to hear from you, and let us know what you'd like us to cover in future. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram at Property Hub UK. And you can find us on YouTube as well, just by searching Property Hub. We'll be back on Tuesday answering another couple of your questions on Ask Rob and Rob. So we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.